Yo, what's up guys? So back then when I made that JLX review video, I felt like, I was always under the impression that, upgrading to a JLX or to a OTTO V5, I felt like it wasn't really worth it because, to me, JLF is already decent enough. It's already good enough for most people, so I just felt like the benefits weren't that significant if you were to upgrade. But that was only a year ago, and it's been a while, so I actually tried out the JLX 1, JLX 2, and the OTTO V5. And yeah, my opinion has definitely been changed. I do feel like it's definitely worth it, but it still depends on the individual, don't get me wrong. But if you're set on maining the JLF, or if you're just a big fan of the Sanwa lever, and you've been considering upgrading, then hopefully this video can give you some insight on whether or not you should or shouldn't upgrade. So yeah, I'll just be covering 4 main levers: the JLF, the JLX1, the JLX2, and the OTTO V5. And technically it's 5 levers if you count the silent Sanwa PCB. But other than that, I'll just be explaining the physical differences between each of these levers and what's unique about them, and then I'll be testing them in game and tell you guys like how they feel and how they function. So first, let's start off with the physical differences between each of these levers. So this is a regular Sanwa JLF. The JLF pivot is white and it uses, the material is made out of palm. Now for the main body on the bottom, it's using nylon or some kind of plastic. I'm pretty sure it's a nylon. And the washer is on the bottom. It's like a circle shape. So yeah, that's just a regular JLF. Now for the JLX1, so now they changed the pivot to a new material. It's black now, but they actually changed the material to from palm to nylon, and they said it was polished. So yeah, it's definitely way smoother than the regular JLF pivot. As for the bottom, they also changed the main body. So instead of nylon, they changed the body to a palm material. So just basically more durable and more sturdier. They also changed the washer a little bit. It's still a circle shape, but it's thicker, so it's less prone to popping off or like just moving in general. Here they are side by side. Here is the bottom. So now this is the JLX2, using the same materials as the JLX1, except for the washer. So they changed the shape of the washer to a cross shape or an X shape. So that just makes it so that the washer doesn't move at all, or at least very minimal. So compared to the JLX1 washer, as you can see, different shape. This is just it's definitely not going to move that much. And well, the JLX1 also doesn't move that much, but in game, I feel like there's definitely a significant difference in the feel, and I'll get to that later in the video when I test them. But yeah, here they are, side by side. Here's the top. So yeah, just basically a better JLX1, same materials, but the washer is now changed to an X shape or a cross shape. Let's head on over to the OTTO V5. So the OTTO V5 has a Teflon or PTFE pivot. Same with the core, it's also made out of Teflon or PTFE. So the good thing about the OTTO V5, the one big advantage of it is that you don't need to add Shin grease, because the is already like the material themselves is already like super smooth. So as you can see, I'm just moving the the body of the lever is already like sliding off. So yeah, that's one big advantage of the OTTO V5. You don't need to re-grease it because it's already smooth by itself. Here is the bottom of the OTTO V5. So it doesn't use a washer just like the other JLF and JLX levers. So that's pretty cool. As for the main body, I'm not exactly sure what type of material it uses. If anybody knows what kind of material the main body is for the OTTO V5, do let me know in the comments below. I'm just gonna assume that it's either plastic or also PTFE, but I don't know, I'm not exactly sure, but yeah. Here it is side by side with the JLX2. Here is the bottom. Here it is side by side with the JLX. Here is the bottom. And finally, here it is side by side with the JLF. Here's the bottom part. Alright guys, so now I'll just be giving you guys the weight for each lever with the pivot included. So let's start with the JLF. So it weighs about 81 grams. So JLX1 weighs about 89 grams. Now for the JLX2, weighs about 91 grams. And finally, the OTTO V5 weighs around 87 grams. Alright, now let's head on over to the switches themselves. So this is just a regular JLF microswitch PCB. So it uses Omrons. It has that like brownish, yellowish color on the back, and it has the red colored microswitches. As for the board, it uses paper phenol for the main circuit board. Now, compared to the JLX PCB, you can already see that the color is different on the back. I think this is actually transparent because you can see the green on the circuit board. But if I put it on a different angle, it's only gray. Maybe it's just the angle, maybe it is green. I'm not exactly sure. It does also use Omrons. This one uses a different material. So instead of paper phenol, it uses CEM3. You can even see the label on the circuit board right there. So yeah, basically, it's just more durable compared to the paper phenol on the JLF PCB. Now this is the silent PCB. These are Sanwa's own switches, so they're not really Omrons, but they do have a similar shape. Basically very similar and identical to the JLX PCB, but the switches the only difference is the switches themselves. So, and you can actually adjust the tension. So there's 5 levels. So the higher the level is, the higher tension it is. Now, in my experience, I feel like the highest level is the most similar to a regular JLX or JLF PCB, because I feel like any level under level 5 for the tension, I feel like it's just way too loose. Alright, so now for the accessories. This is actually like the JLX gate. So I don't have the original JLF square gate, but they're both pretty much the same in terms of like shape at least. I think the JLF, I'm not exactly sure, but I think the JLX gate rattles more than the JLF. And then the JLX gate is actually like interchangeable, so you can actually change it. As you can see, you can take out the square gate and switch it to a different shape. In terms of specs, they all come stock with the same stock spring and the same black actuator, except for the JLX1. So the JLX1 actually comes with the white actuator. So this is 16.2 millimeters, but the original Sanwa black actuator is 15.8. But other than that, same specs overall. Now for the OTTO V5, you actually get 3 actuators as well as 2 additional gates. So these actuators, they're actually bigger than the stock actuator. So this is an oversized. This one is I think it's hard to see, but there's 2 dots indicating the size for each actuator. So this one is 2 dots, so that's 12 millimeters. This one is 2 dots and 1 small dot, so that's the 12.5 millimeter one. And finally, it's hard to see, but there's 3 dots, 3 big dots, so that's the 13 millimeter oversized actuator. But basically, you know, I tried them and they just basically make the Sanwa lever feel tighter, and it makes the actuation of the switches way faster. So yeah, it kind of decreases the throw as well. Now for the gates, you get 2 gates. You have the FD, which is just a square gate, and then you have the BFY. So it's like a more rounded squircle gate. Here they are on the back. So this one is more rounded. The cardinals on this one are still flat, so not exactly a circle gate, but yeah, definitely more of a squircle. This one also kind of has rounded diagonals. Now compared to just the regular JLX gate, I think the OTTO V5 square gate is definitely more rounded. But I don't know, I'm not exactly sure. I think something about it just feels a little off to me, so I definitely prefer the regular JLX gate over the OTTO V5 gate. And as for the squircle gate, yeah, I'm just not a big fan of it. I definitely prefer a tighter corner. So yeah, this is, for me personally, I still prefer the JLX gate. So for the inner diameter for the original JLX gate, so it's about 17 millimeters for the cardinals. For the diagonals, it's about 19.2. So that's for the regular JLX gate. So for the square gate, for the OTTO V5 square gate, for the cardinals is also about the same, 17 millimeters. And for the diagonals, it's about 19 millimeters. For the other OTTO gate, the BFY, so the cardinals are 17.7 millimeters. For the diagonals, it's about 18.9. So kind of the same ones for the other square gate. Alright guys, so now I'll be testing each Sanwa lever in Tekken 8, and I'll try to explain like how each lever feels from one another. I'll be using the same default shaft, same black actuator and stock spring, and same regular white Sanwa Balltop. And as for the arcade stick, I'll be using the Razer Pantera. Alright guys, so now we're on the classic old JLF, where it is right there. So yeah, so the JLF, it's nice and loose, but not too loose, obviously. Like, it still has nice control while being really low tension because of that, you know, stock spring is super low tension. So yeah, it's nice and loose, but in terms of smoothness, compared to the other levers like the JLX, JLX2, and the OTTO V5, it's definitely not as smooth as those levers. Like those levers are just way smoother. And another thing that the JLF has in terms of feeling is that it feels, at least compared to the other levers, it feels kind of sluggish. Not necessarily in a bad way, but like, it feels sluggish. Like when you use the other levers like the JLX, JLX2, and OTTO V5, those just feel way more tighter, like, and inputs in general. And since they feel tighter, you can be less gentle with the lever, not necessarily more rough with it. Obviously it's still a Japanese lever, but since the JLF feels more sluggish compared to those levers, I just feel like, at least for me, when I'm doing hand motions or anything in general, really, I feel like I have to be more gentle, because otherwise if I put too much force into it, into a motion, then it would be like inaccurate, right? Like I have to put either I have to use the right amount of force or just be gentle with it. There's just always been a thing about the JLF. You gotta be gentle with it. But I guess you can say the same thing about the other levers as well, since they're all still all, you know, low tension. But for example, right, like I'm on 1P, I'm doing a wave dash, right? As I'm doing a wave dash, I have to be like gentle, because it, you know, the lever feels sluggish. And because if I don't try to be gentle, then what happens is if I try to like, it just doesn't return to neutral as I would expect it to. And you could just say it's because of the spring tension, and like, you know, I could just use like a higher tension spring. But I really do feel like after using those levers that feel way tighter and less sluggish, I can use a little bit more force on those levers by doing anything like with hand motions in general. Now with it, like, and with the JLF, I just have to be gentle, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell like if I'm doing the correct motion, because I have to be like gentle. But you know, as a person who's been using the Sanwa JLF for a long time now, you know, I'm already used to it, so. So yeah, stuff like that, like perfect electrics, like super tight inputs, is a little bit harder on a JLF, because like, again, you have to be gentle. So yeah, basically the JLF, in terms of feel, compared to the other levers, it's a bit looser. It's not that smooth, but smooth enough. And compared to those levers, it just feels a little bit sluggish, to the point where you have to be a bit more gentle. Alright guys, so now we're on the Sanwa JLX 1. There it is right there. There's the new body, and you can see the JLX PCB right there. Okay, so already with the JLX 1, already feels way smoother. And not only does it feel smoother, but it's way less sluggish. It's way tighter than the JLF. So since it's less sluggish, I just feel like I can use a bit more force to confirm my hand motions. I don't have to be as gentle as I was with the JLF, and overall it just feels less sluggish. And yeah, being less sluggish and way tighter, it just makes super tight inputs way easier to execute. you add that with the extra smoothness, and yeah, it just definitely feels way better than the JLF. Bro. Since it's less sluggish and tighter compared to the JLF, like with the JLF, like I said back earlier, I have to be gentle with, you know, my hand motions, especially with like with doing a wave dash. But with the JLX, it's just easier to do a wave dash because it's less sluggish. Yeah, overall it just feels way better. Less sluggish, way tighter, makes tight inputs just easier to execute, and just in general. Basically, with the JLX, compared to the JLF, it feels way smoother, it's less sluggish and way tighter, meaning hand motions are just easier to execute in general, especially tight inputs, because you know you don't have to be as gentle as, you know, when you use a JLF. This is less sluggish. You can use more force to be able to execute your hand motions properly. Alright guys, so now we're on the JLX 2. So yeah, I mean, on the surface, you can't really tell the difference between the JLX 1 and the JLX 2. But let me actually remove the gate and the switch. So as you can see right there, the X-shaped washer. So yeah, JLX 2. It's basically just an improved version of the JLX, right? In terms of smoothness compared to the JLX 1, I would say either on par or maybe a little bit smoother. It's really hard to tell, really. I think the reason why it feels maybe a little bit smoother, even though they're using the same materials, it is really because of that new shaped X-shaped washer. So whether you're wondering, oh, is that really going to make a difference in the feel? And it definitely does. It's very subtle, but because of that X-shaped washer, my inputs just feel way cleaner. And the lever just feels cleaner overall. Because that X-shaped washer is not moving as much, or I don't think it moves at all, really, compared to the JLX 1 washer, and especially the JLF washer. And since it's not moving, it just makes the compression of the spring even more cleaner than the JLX 1, and especially compared to the JLF. So like, yeah, I think just the compression of the spring, it just feels the most natural on the JLX 2. So the only moving parts in theory, at least to my understanding, should be the spring hat, you know, the spring of course, and the actuator, and the shaft of course, and the pivot. Basically the washer is not like interfering with the compression. So that way that's why it just feels way cleaner. So in gameplay, does it really affect it? It's just very subtle though, very subtle. Might not immediately notice it, but you know, since I've, you know, recently just, you know, switched levers, I feel like the difference is definitely a bit noticeable. But if you did like a blind test, it might be really hard to even tell the difference. But I don't think it's placebo at all. It definitely feels cleaner. But in terms of smoothness, it's about on par, or maybe a bit smoother. And I do think that because of that X-shaped washer, it does contribute to the JLX2 feeling a bit smoother, but not by much. But they're both really smooth at the end of the day, so they're both the JLX1 and the JLX2. They both feel really smooth and smoother, way smoother than the JLF. So it does what JLX1 does, but even better. So better smoothness, cleaner inputs, and cleaner feeling overall, and still very tight. not very tight, but like way tighter than the JLF. It could even be, I think it does feel tighter than the JLX one by a little bit as well, because you know I'm doing like, you see how much I'm putting force into my wave dash? It's because it's tighter, right? If I were to do this on, say, like a JLF, and maybe on a JLX one even, maybe not so much a JLX one, but on a JLX 2, I don't have to be like extremely gentle. I can definitely confirm my hand motions more. So yeah, it just feels super nice, like very nice. Fuck. But yeah, very consistent, very tight inputs. I feel like with the JLX 2, it's just, you can be more confident with your hand motions, like, and doing tight inputs like an electric. So yeah, basically JLX 2 is just a way better JLX 1. Cleaner inputs, cleaner compression on the spring, and the overall feel of the lever. But yeah, definitely feels way better than the JLF and feels like a better JLX 1 basically. Alright guys, so we're finally on the OTTO V5. So there it is right there. I'm also using the JLX PCB on the OTTO V5. Okay, so how does the OTTO V5 feel? So yeah, immediately it's like very smooth, but since it's using PTFE or Teflon, it's smooth but a different kind of smooth, you know what I mean? Like, it's more like a buttery smooth feeling. So yeah, it feels like a more buttery smooth feeling, while the JLX2, JLX1, their smoothness, you can definitely feel that it highly depends on how much Shin grease has been applied. And when I reapplied the Shin grease on all my levers, you know, I tried to add the same amount. Tried to add not too much, but not too little, you know, just right. So, you know, you can definitely feel those levers being highly dependent on that Shin grease. But the OTTO V5 does not use any grease at all. So, the fact that it gets this smooth just with the PTFE is actually like really nice. Since the JLX2 and the other levers highly depend on, you know, how much Shin grease has been applied, potentially those levers can feel smoother than the OTTO V5 if you add like a lot of Shin grease. Now, depending on the person, that could be a good or a bad thing. You know, you don't want to add, typically you don't want to add too much Shin grease for your Sanwa levers. You want to add like the right amount typically, but it could, that's also like highly preference based. If you want, you can definitely add a lot more, or you could add way less. I usually try to add the right amount for my Sanwa levers. So yeah, highly depends on that. But again, the OTTO V5 is still incredibly smooth. And just like the JLX2, it's definitely cleaner than the JLX1. I don't think it's as clean as the JLX2. Maybe it's because it's just a different type of material, but I mean, they're both clean, don't get me wrong. Definitely not sluggish at all. Both are very tight levers. But I feel like the JLX2 is just a tad bit cleaner. It's kind of hard to describe because, like, you know, the differences are so subtle. But I guess the JLX2, it feels like the spring is like in the air, while the OTTO V5, the spring is like, it feels like even the spring is covered in grease. at the end of the day, both are really smooth and very clean. So what makes the OTTO V5 better than the JLX2 and the other levers? And I mentioned this earlier, but obviously, like, since it's PTFE, on PTFE, you don't have to re-grease it. So in theory, right, like, it's gonna stay consistent for a long time. It's gonna stay smooth for a long time. Basically, like, you don't have to do any maintenance to it. You don't have to add any grease. So yeah, in theory, you don't have to do any maintenance to the lever forever. Hopefully, I don't know how long PTFE lasts, but it's definitely gonna last longer than Shin Etsu grease. So yeah, so that's really the only weakness for the other levers, is that the Shin Etsu grease is gonna degrade over time, and that will kind of like mess up with your consistency with your inputs and overall your skill as a player. But with the OTTO V5, it's gonna stay smooth the same way as it is day one for a long time. So yeah, that's the biggest advantage, and I think the biggest reason why the OTTO V5 is just super good and way better than even the JLX2. So yeah, basically OTTO V5, buttery smooth feeling. It feels a little bit different compared to the feeling of a regular Sanwa lever like the JLX2 and JLF. Still very tight and clean, not sluggish at all, just like the JLX2. And because of that PTFE material for the pivot and the core, you don't have to re-grease the lever, and it's just going to stay consistent for a long time. Okay, so now I'm gonna rank each lever and see which ones are the best. I have the JLF, the JLX, JLX2, JLX2 Silent, and then the OTTO V5. So that's actually 5 levers. So you may be wondering, oh, why didn't I cover the JLX2 Silent or JLX1 Silent? The reason why I didn't cover it in the test is because I have 2 copies of the silent Microswitches, and both of them had stopped working for me. Well, one of them had the bottom switch completely stopped working, and then my second copy, the diagonals just stopped becoming, the diagonals became inconsistent. So basically both of my silent Microswitches, they aren't that usable for me anymore. So I would just put it in question mark, because your mileage may vary with the silent Microswitches. So that's why I recommend that if you're considering the JLX2 Silent or the JLX1 Silent, you can just get the Microswitch separately, and so you can save some money and not like buy another lever. But otherwise, if my silent Microswitches were still working and they didn't die on me, I would actually put this in S+ tier, because the switches feel very nice. They're very linear, so it kind of makes it smoother, because they're the switches are linear. It also has adjustable tension, so there's that as well. And of course they're silent, so them being silent is a big plus for me, just because I live with others, and when they were still really good and I can still use them, I was able to play with my arcade stick without disturbing others. But since they died on me twice, I'm just gonna put it in a question mark, because it could just be my copies, and your mileage may vary. So yeah, so now let's go to the JLF. I would put this in A tier, because it's still a really good lever, right? Like, just because these levers are so much better than it doesn't mean it's a bad lever. There's a reason why the JLF has been the standard for like decades. I don't know how long, but very long time. Yeah, it's because the JLF is very reliable, it's cheap, very consistent in how it feels. That's why it's been the standard for decades now. But yeah, compared to these levers, I would just put it in A tier. Still a good solid lever, especially for it's still gonna be a good lever for like most people. And even pros, like there's still some pros that use the JLF nowadays. But in terms of like specs and like feel, I do think it's a bit outdated. You know, it's been with us for a long time now, and ever since they released the JLX 2 and also like the OTTO V5, I just feel it's definitely like a bit outdated nowadays. But definitely still a good lever. Okay, so the JLX 1, I'm gonna put it in A+ tier. I put it in A+ tier because it's already better than the JLF in a lot of ways. Like for example, smoother and also tighter, so it doesn't feel sluggish like the JLF. But let's say you're unable to tell the difference between the two, just in terms of like feel. There's still other benefits to the JLX over the JLF, like better durability, like you know, with their with the new main body being made out of palm, as well as the bigger washer, so that the washer moves less and it's less prone to popping off. So yeah, it's just gonna be a higher quality and longer lasting lever compared to the JLF. Now the JLX 2, it kind of highly depends on the individual because it's either S+ tier or S tier. It's gonna be S tier because, well, for me at least, because it's basically a JLX 1 but way better. You know, it does what the JLX 1 does, but it's still very smooth. It's also, because of the X-shaped washer, the lever just feels way cleaner. The compression of the spring is just, you know, overall way cleaner. And it's like hard to describe, but it feels like you're getting the most natural feeling of the spring, because the washer is sitting still and the only thing that's moving, again, in theory, is the spring head, the spring, and the actuator, and of course the shaft and the pivot. Depending on the individual, it could also be S+ tier. The reason why is because the pricing. So I mean, the price is like only a few dollars more than the JLF, at least on Focus Attack. It could be different for other, you know, sites and for other countries. The price increase is definitely very little. It's only a few dollars more, so you're getting a much better lever and much longer lasting lever than a JLF for only a few dollars more. And when you compare it to the OTTO V5, which is way pricier than the JLX 2 and all of these levers, like this is just a better value for most people compared to the OTTO V5. So yeah, it's gonna be S+ tier for in terms of like value, but for me, I feel like the OTTO V5 is still definitely a better. I feel like for me, the OTTO V5 is still better than the JLX 2, mostly because of the fact that you don't need to grease it. You don't need to do maintenance. You don't need to add. You don't need to clean the lever. You don't need to reapply Shin-etsu grease once in a while. So in terms of like consistency, it's just gonna be way better and it's gonna last longer than all these levers. But then again, it's definitely way pricier than the JLX 2. So if you're gonna get OTTO V5, then definitely I would suggest just getting like the mod kit, because if you get it like pre-built, it's definitely like super expensive. Like I feel like that's kind of overpriced in my opinion. I feel like the best of the best is definitely the OTTO V5, but in terms of value, I do think the JLX 2 is better. And with the JLX 1, I don't think there's even a point in getting the JLX 1 over the JLX 2, because first of all, the JLX 2 is just a better version of the JLX. But let's say you already have a JLX, do you really need to get the JLX 2? I would say it's only worth it if you go with the mod kit, because the JLX 2 also has a mod kit, so you can upgrade to a JLX 2 for cheaper. But other than that, I don't think you really need to go out of your way to upgrade from a JLX 1 to a JLX 2. But if you're coming for a JLX, definitely try to get the JLX 2 over the JLX 1. And I don't even know if Sanwa is still making the JLX 1. I'm pretty sure the JLX 2 is gonna replace the JLX 1. So yeah, I just think that there's no point in getting the JLX 1 over the JLX 2. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Alright guys, so now I'm gonna talk about the different types of mods and upgrades you can do to your Sanwa lever. I do apologize for the reduction in quality. I was gonna use my phone for this part, but I was kind of running out of space, so I'm just using my webcam. But yeah, basically I'm gonna talk about the different types of mods and upgrades you can do so you can customize your Sanwa lever to how you want it. These are all gonna apply to, you know, all Sanwa levers. So we have the tops, the shafts, the microswitches, and of course the tension spring and the gate shape and actuator size. So first let's talk about tops. So obviously everyone knows that you can change your top on your Sanwa lever. But the thing is, it's not just for looks. Depending on the weight of the top, it can actually impact the way your lever feels. So remember how I said like the JLF feels a bit sluggish and a bit loose? That's when I use like a heavier top, right? Like this one right here. No, this is just a regular Sanwa white ball top. However, if I use a lightweight top, like this Brook wooden ball top, it's gonna make the lever feel even more controlled. Basically, it's gonna make it less sluggish and a bit tighter. So here, let me measure it. Okay, you can't really see it right now, but I'll just show you guys like a picture of it on screen. But it measures at 27 grams. So that's for the white ball top, normal Sanwa ball top. And for this Brook wooden ball top, it measures around 19 grams. So that's like 10 grams lighter. And another thing about this specific ball top, this is a Brook wooden ball top. So this ball top actually has a major advantage compared to like a normal ball top. And that's because this specific top has some type of coating on it. So basically this top, right, I have sweaty hands, and as I'm playing, you know, my hand would sweat a lot. And so, for example, if I'm using a normal ball top without any coating, if my hand sweats, then the top is gonna feel very slippery. But this specific ball top though, since it has that coating, even though my hand would sweat a lot, it still manages to stay grippy and not slippery at all compared to a normal ball top without any coating. So yeah, this is why I use this specific top, because it's lightweight, so it's gonna make the lever feel more controlled and less loose, less sluggish, but also because of the coating, so it's gonna help with sweat and it's gonna stay grippy and it won't slip off my fingers easily. But yeah, basically the weight of the top does impact the feel of the lever. And the thing is, the same concept actually applies to shafts as well. So I have two shafts right here. This is just a normal Sanwa shaft, and this right here is a Freak Mods shaft. So this is a detachable shaft, so you can like detach it. So that's a really nice feature. But this is also less weight than a normal Sanwa shaft. So the Sanwa shaft weighs around 27 grams, and for the Freak Mods X Groove Link shaft, it weighs about 19 grams. So yeah, that's also 10 grams lighter. So yeah, it does have the same effect, that it's gonna make the lever feel more controlled, less loose, and less sluggish. So yeah, do definitely consider the weight of your shafts and tops, because they can significantly impact the feel of the lever. So now let's move on to the microswitches. So basically, usually these microswitches are sold separately. So let's say you have a worn out microswitch, maybe it feels loose, maybe one of the maybe it's broken, maybe one of the switches don't actuate or don't register, then you can definitely just get a new Microswitch PCB. And again, you can also try out the silent Microswitch PCB. They also sell this separately. So, or you can also get like a Bitbang Gaming Shuriken JLF PCB, and what that is that you can use different types of switches other than these Omrons or the regular Sanwa switches. So basically, you can choose like different types of micro switches. You can like mix and match. You can experiment what type of switch you want. Maybe you prefer a micro switch with high actuation force, or the opposite. Maybe you want something more linear. So yeah, I haven't really looked into it. I just prefer using the regular Sanwa Microswitch PCBs. So, but yeah, that's also another option. And then we also have the tension springs and the type of gates and the actuator size. So these are gonna be like the most noticeable in terms of feel when you swap them out. I have here like the blue oversized actuator and the octagonal gate. For me personally, I don't really like them. I prefer the square gate because I feel like the octagonal gate doesn't work well with the stock like actuator. And even then, I tried it with the blue actuator, and I still didn't like it. I feel like the octagonal gate adds a bit too much throw, and then with the oversized blue actuator, I just didn't like how earlier the switches activate, you know. But yeah, if you're considering other gate types and actuator sizes, definitely do consider the Sanwa Pro mod kit. I'm very interested in the tension springs. Yeah, because the mod kit includes different types of tension springs, and I kind of want to try those out. So far, I only have the stock springs, you know, the stock Sanwa springs that come included with the lever. But if you don't want the mod kit, these can be these are also sold separately. So yeah. And one last thing, so basically for the OTTO V5, you can actually like get a stainless steel pivot. Stainless, what the fuck? There's actually parts, stainless steel parts for it. So like you can get a stainless steel pivot, stainless steel core, and also there's also stainless steel actuators. I'm definitely interested in the stainless steel core. I mean, not core. Fuck. I'm definitely interested in the stainless steel pivot, and I'm also interested in the. Bro, why can't I speak English? And I'm also interested in the PTFE spring head. I feel like that would make the OTTO V5 way smoother than the stock Teflon on Teflon. But so far, it's already decent enough for me. But in the future, I'm definitely gonna try those out. So yeah. Okay, so in conclusion, is it actually worth upgrading your Sanwa lever? If you're like a competitive player and you want the best of the best, or maybe you're just a hobbyist and you like, you know, you're into the arcade stick hobby and you like collecting levers, or you know, maybe you're just using a really worn out Sanwa lever, Sanwa JLF, you know, maybe it feels really bad, then yes, I would say it's definitely worth it to upgrade your Sanwa lever. But if you're like a casual, maybe you're new to arcade sticks, I would say just hold off a little bit until you've really decided that you want to really use an arcade stick and main it, and you want to main Sanwa levers. Then yeah, definitely worth it to upgrade. There's also going to be people that might not be able to tell the difference between each of the levers, and I think that's completely fine, because you know, everybody perceive and feel things differently. So just know that if you're one of those people that can't tell the difference, you should at least be able to appreciate the other benefits, like you know, like with the JLX, like with the better main body, better durability, it's just gonna last longer than your typical JLF. And there's also with the OTTO V5 a huge benefit of not needing to reapply Shin grease. You don't even need to apply Shin grease on it, so basically you don't need to do any maintenance in theory. So yeah, there's that benefit as well. And just overall, they're just all higher quality levers compared to the JLF. So yeah, if you watched the entire video and you've reached this part, I do appreciate you watching. Feel free to comment anything about Sanwa levers or any critiques about my video. Other than that, hopefully you learned something, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and yeah, that's about it.